Hi everyone, this is Tanya from Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I add color to my Beatrix Potter study. Now, I have to apologize up front because I inadvertently deleted the intro to this where I talk about how I got to this point, because you can see I already have washi tape around, the paper's already tinted. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at what I decided to use for color on this piece. I've decided to use the Derwent Graphitint, and I was tossing this around in the last video, and if you didn't catch that, I'll link that down below for you. And if you've never used Graphitint, I'll link this video as well where I swatched all of the colors, and you can kind of decide if it's something you might like to try. If you are new to the channel, thank you so much for stopping by. I am so happy that you are here, and for those of you that stop by often, I'm so glad that you hop back on. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'm going to have the colors up on the screen for you as I put them over in the palette, and I'll try to keep those caught up so you'll always know what I'm using. Now let's talk about how I got to this point. As you can see, I have some washi tape already on the piece. And this is not high quality washi tape. It's just to give me a little bit of a border around there. Plus it helps to keep my paper flat, even though I don't have it taped down to a board. I'm not sure how that works, but the magic works. And the paper is tinted. I tinted this with Derwent ink tints, and I used Baked Earth for that. I almost forgot there for a minute. I used the color Baked Earth. The reason I tint the paper is that I'm trying to make it look as much like Miss Potter's as I can. And hers is an aged paper because it's an older paper, and I kind of just want to replicate that on my piece. Therefore, I tinted the paper. Plus, I like working with tinted paper instead of starting with a white paper. However, if you do that, you have to think about what colors you're putting on top, because it does affect the colors on top. I knew I wanted to start with Meadow. That's what we're putting down now. Meadow is not really yellow and it's not really green if you look at it over on the palette. And by the way, if you've never used Graphitint, you notice when I go over to the palette, I'll give it a swirl. That's not so I can fill up my brush, and that is so I can keep all of those little graphite pigments mixed around with the color, because they tend to separate. So that's what you're seeing over in the palette. It might look like it's green, and that's just where all of those pigments are the graphite is kind of pooling up in certain areas. But all of these leaves on this plant, and forgive me, I have no idea what the plant is. I will have a link to this below. This reference came from the Victoria and Albert Museum website. So I will link this piece down below and you can take a look for yourself. And if you want this drawing so you can follow along, I don't believe I mentioned this in the last video where I inked it, but let me know and I'll put my drawing on my blog and you can trace it, you can copy it, whatever you want to do. If you already have it drawn out, sometimes it's easier than taking a look at what she's done. And I explain it in the inking video, why I inked it the way I did and what I used and all of that. So just take a look and you'll see that. But let's get back to these leaves. I am putting down Meadow and giving them a good yellow base. And again, because of the ink tints underneath with that Baked Earth, it gives it kind of an antique look on that yellow. But these leaves had kind of a yellow-green base. And what you're going to see is I'm going to come through and put kind of a base on all of these areas. That's why I have the 3 colors over there. That's what I see underneath. I'm seeing a yellow-green underneath these particular leaves. And I'm skipping around on here, not because of any particular reason other than I haven't really studied the piece before I put the color down. So I'm looking back and forth from my reference to my art and I'm adding it in as I'm going. I'm kind of, deciphering the whole map as I'm going along here. But this is my map for doing the yellow-green leaves. So I'm going to get that down. Some of the leaves on here have, I'm not going to say they're gray, but they're not really green. And they don't have much of another color on top. So some of the colors you're seeing me put on now, when I get all of the base colors down, and you'll know I'm there because all of these will be filled in, I'm going to leave them like that. I'm not going to put anything on top. When you're working with watercolor, you can go ahead and add stuff on top even when it's a little damp. You kind of have to be careful because you don't want any ballooning of the color. And you can see I'm going back and adding a little more in some spots. Those areas were a super yellow green, so I wanted to make sure I got enough of that meadow underneath. But with Graphitint, it's a little bit different. If I'm wanting to put some color on top and I'm wanting to keep this property of the yellow underneath, I'm going to need to let this dry completely. I can't come in with it being a little bit damp, because what happens is the minute your paintbrush hits it and has a little bit of water in it, even if it has some color in it, a little bit of water, it picks up that graphite if it's slightly wet, and it just pulls it right off the paper like an eraser. So you really have to be careful if you're wanting to layer colors on top. And that's what I'm going to be doing with this, is layering colors on top in most of these areas. You need to make sure that your Graphitint is completely dry. So you'll see me paint back on top. There'll be like little breaks in this video. That's because some time has passed and I've either allowed it to dry on its own or I've made it dry. Now, this little area that I'm painting on top, because it's getting warmer down south and I'm working by a window and I have my window cracked, that area was already getting dry. So I could put another color on top and it didn't pull it off. I need a little bit of brown in here, so we're gonna add some russet. And the colors, again, if you've never used Graphitint, the colors over in the little wells do not really represent what they actually look like on paper. So if you do purchase these, I encourage you to swatch these out ahead of time. Try layering them, try mixing them together before you put them on paper, and really get a feel of how they look, because that's called autumn brown, and it looks brown over in the pan in person, but when you put it over in the palette, you can see it's a red color. When you put it on the paper, it's going to be red. So, and especially the darker colors, when you're talking about the graphite colors, there's a graphite green and then there's a regular graphite, and they all look the same. So I always keep that little plastic paper that came with it, and I shouldn't call it a paper, but the little plastic insert that came with it that shows the colors. I always keep that so I'll know where everything is on all of those wells, because I don't use this often enough to have it memorized like I do my Winsor and Newton, so I always keep that handy. Now, this is going to be my process for laying down the base colors for the rest of this little section of the video. And again, you're going to see a little bleep in it, and you're going to know that time has passed. I've either made it dry or let it dry, and you'll see me painting back on top. But before we get to that point, I wanted to ask you guys a question. And I could have done a poll on my channel, but I don't want just anybody answering it. I want you guys who are actually watching the videos to answer this question. We've been talking about music in some of our comments on here on some of the videos. What do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Would you rather, when I'm not explaining something, to have a little light music? And I am going to turn that volume down. I do have trouble hearing, and sometimes I don't know how loud the volume is. I try to match it to my voice so that it's not shocking, because I think it used to be shocking when I first started making these videos. I didn't really know what I was doing on the music, but let me know. Do you prefer a video that has talking and then silence when I don't have anything to say when I'm just working? Or would you rather have a little bit of a musical interlude? Now, I'll tell you, in this video, you're going to get a bit of a musical interlude, but it is going to be turned down. So let me know what you think in the comments because you're the ones watching it. I want to do what you like, so let me know. And if it's half and half, then I'll probably do half and half. But let me know what you think, and that's what I'll do for future videos. Now I'm adding some more colors to the palette, and as you can see, I'm starting to mix the colors before I put it on. So I have a couple of greens there that I've mixed up. I've kept the other colors that are in the palette. In just a few minutes, you're going to see me add some more meadow, kind of in one of those larger areas, mixing areas by itself, so I can add that in as I go. And we're going to be doing a little bit different technique here. As you can see, I'm going back on top of those yellow areas, and it's making more of a yellow green, and that's what I needed for those. There are several shades of green in here, and you'll see me tap like I just did back in that meadow and come back on top. So if it's not quite the yellow green I want, since it's all still wet, the colors I'm putting on, I'll be able to mix that right on top of the paper. Now, if I'm trying to mix it and the color underneath is still wet, again, it'll pull that up. But if I'm wanting to mix on the paper, you are able to mix on the paper. You just can't layer unless you let the bottom layer dry first. So one thing about Beatrix Potter's art that I really love, when she is putting colors down, you can tell that she will put down color and put another color next to it and allow them to blend together. So you might have a blue and a red that come together and have purple in the center, but yet you still have a blue on one side and a red on the other side in her piece. And I really like that laying down of color. So that's what you're going to see me doing in this area. I might put down some brown, some of that russet brown, and then come back and dab some meadow in there as well and let it just kind of flow out to the rest of the color. So this is what you're going to see in this part. So now we're ready for that musical interlude that I'm going to turn down in volume. Let me know if it's still too loud, and let me know what you would like to have in the future. Just put that in the comments below. I wanted to hop back on and talk about this leaf in particular. You know, it's kind of a highlight leaf. It's facing us. There are a couple of them that are doing that. This one I put a very light yellow base because I did see some yellow green in there. But my goodness, look how many greens we're going to end up with on here. There were quite a few, so I'm not sure if that was her lighting. I don't know if that's what the leaf looked like. Perhaps it was in a state of decay. Perhaps it was a dying leaf. I'm not certain because some of it actually looks just a little bit yellow. So that's why you're seeing so many colors going back and forth. But because it is dry underneath, I can add those on top, and because I'm adding the colors quickly, I can add some of the blue greens and some of the yellow greens and allow them to kind of mix together on there. And you're going to see that right in here. I can add some red on top of that yellow green, and it kind of blends all of those together. Again, I love that about Beatrix's work. I love the way she blends her colors. This is another leaf that has a bunch of colors in it, but it's not just the greens. We have some reds and some blue greens and some yellow greens. And again, I love the blending on these. Something that makes it a little easier to blend is this brush that I'm using. Now these blue brushes, the blue handle brushes, are from Winsor & Newton, their Cotman series. You may see me pick up a brush that has kind of a dark gray handle. That is a Rule and Langnickel brush from their Zen series, and those brushes hold a lot of water. So you'll see me mix paints over in the well sometimes when I first get started. And that's because they hold more water and they let me do that a bit more quickly. Or if I have a large area to cover on the paper, I will use those brushes because they hold a lot of water. When I'm doing something like this, especially with a Graphitint, and I need to really be able to have some water in my brush but control it and not have too much, these Winsor & Newton brushes from the Cotman series will do that for me. Some people like flat brushes. I'm more of a round brush girl unless I'm doing acrylic. And by the way, the next video is going to be an acrylic painting. So I don't think I've done that on this channel. So if you're interested in that, it's going to be kind of a beginner acrylic thing. For anyone that might want to get started in acrylic. It's just kind of a fun little abstract painting. But these brushes that are round like this, I prefer for the watercolor, and I really do like the Winsor & Newton Cotman series because they hold just the right amount of water when you're doing tedious things like this, and you have to be careful about how much water is on your brush. These are my pick, especially for using Graphitint. Have just a bit more on here and this piece will be finished. Now I believe I only used 2 layers on any part of this where I added paint, and like I said, some areas I only painted once because they were very light and they didn't have a lot of color to them, and most of it, just like this area, once I had the base color down, I came back and basically mixed most of the colors right on the paper. Even though I had some mixed over to the side, I put colors side by side, or I dabbed them on top of each other to allow them to kind of blend together. I will have all of these supplies listed in the description below. And I know I've kind of pushed the Winsor and Newton brushes. I'm not sponsored by them. They're just my pick. They're just some of my favorite brushes I've ever used. So I'll have those listed below. Some of those will be affiliate links. Some will just be regular links. Choose what you want. I always put down below where you're going to get the best deal. So always check it out for yourself. You might find something better out there than what I could find for you. If I've missed something, let me know and I'll put that down below. Well, that is it for this piece, my friends. Thank you so much for joining me. If you made it to the end, kudos to you. As I said, I have an acrylic piece coming up. I have some more Beatrix Potter. I hope you'll join me for those. But until then, I will see you in the next one.